You have brains in your head, you have feet in your shoes, you can steer yourself any direction you choose. You're you're on your own and you know what you know, and you are the guy who will decide where to go. On the journey of life, we face many choices. What career should I pursue? Where should I live? What should I do with my money and time? What kind of person should I be? Anyway, what should I stand for? As we make these choices, large and small, we chart the courses of our lives, creating our unique selves and making an impact on the world and the people around us. And whether we think about it consciously or not, we want these choices to turn out well. We want to live good lives and be happy. Of course, people have different ideas about what it means to live a good life. One person might think her life is good when she has lots of money. Another one, he has a large family. Another one, she contributes to making the world a better place. Nevertheless, each of us seeks the path that will bring us happiness and success while navigating the inevitable bang-ups and hang-ups, lurches and slumps that get in our way. There is a reason that Dr. Seuss's All the Places You'll Go is popular as a graduation present. In this book, Dr. Seuss protagonist faces the challenges, opportunities, and unexpected joys that life offers and responds to them with courage and imagination. So what is the best way to make all of these difficult choices well? How do you make your way successfully through the maze of life? How should you deal with the hang-ups and slumps, the lonely games and confusing wiggled roads, the hanking cracks, and other real and imagined monsters you'll encounter along the way? Dr. Seuss assures his reader that he'll succeed 98 and 3/4% guaranteed, but what does it mean to succeed anyway? What is a good and worthwhile life, and how do we achieve it? Questioning life's big questions. For ancient Greek and Roman philosophers, questions about the good life were fundamental not only to philosophical inquiry, but also to human life in general. The first philosopher to ask these questions prom- prominently was Socrates, 469 through 99 BC, who referred to them as the most important matters. In life, Socrates assumed that the subsequent ancient philosophers agreed that all human desires good and happy lives, although we're often short-sighted or confused about what that means. Sometimes previously we even do things we know will make us miserable. Nevertheless, deep down, deep down we do want to be happy and flourish. Indeed, many ancient philosophers went further and argued that ultimately the desire for happiness underlies every choice we make, even the most stupid and impetuous ones. Suppose a teenager gets drunk and is arrested. Driving home from a party, Socrates would say that as stupid and thoughtless as his action might seem, his choices must have made sense, at least in terms of what seemed right to him at the time. Perhaps he wanted to be accepted by his friends, or didn't want to have to call his parents and get in trouble. To be sure, he wasn't thinking clearly or well. All the same, he did what he thought was best. So even if he never stops to think about the most important matters in life, happiness, virtue, what it means to be human, or in general, as Socrates puts it, condition of his soul, nevertheless, his actions and choices reflect his unexamined values, assumptions, beliefs. He makes a decision based on what deep down he believes is good and worthwhile, and if his beliefs are shoddy, so will be his life. Dr. Seuss' book of often featured chooses whose unexamined and false beliefs prevent them from being happy or satisfied with their lives. For example, teachers tell the story of two kind teachers who share the blame of star-bellied sneetches and the plain-bellied sneetches. The difference between the two is not significant. Those stars weren't big. They were really so small you might think such a thing wouldn't matter at all. Star-bellied teachers look down upon plain-bellied ones, exclude them for all their games, and leave them out in the cold during their frankfurter roast and marshmallow toasts. Teachers on the beaches are miserable and divided, all because of their silly beef that little belly stars make some teachers better than others. Then a fix-up chappie arrives with a wondrous machine that for a price can add stars to unstarred sneech bellies. The plain bellies eagerly line up thinking that once they have stars, they'll be able to participate fully in Sneetch society. However, when the original star belly Sneetches see what has happened, they want to maintain their distinctive status, so they pay the fix-it-up chappie to take their stars off. And as every child knows, the situation spoon spirals out of control. Sneetches run in and out of the machines, putting on stars, taking them off, and all while paying more and more to the fix-it-up chappie until they have nothing left. No one can even remember who had a star or not in the first place. Only the Sylvester McBean drives off laughing, taking a huge pile of Sneetch cash. Do the Sneetches learn their lesson? They decide that Sneetches are Sneetches, and no kind of Sneetch is the best on the beaches. They finally realized that the beliefs they had divided them were false and meaningless. Until that point, no one ever thought to question them. According to Socrates, we may have many of these false and happiness destroying beliefs. The problem is that most of the time, like the Sneetches, we don't even think to examine or question them. We just accept the prevalent worldview uncritically, often for no better reason than that it is what everybody thinks. As we grow up, we absorb and internalize from our parents and in culture a whole slew of beliefs and prejudice about how the world works, what life is about, and what is important. However, most of these unexamined options are confused, contradictory, hopelessly simplistic, or just plain wrong. So we blunder mindlessly through life, treating each other badly for no good reason, limiting our horizons and wasting effort on things that don't matter and may even make us positively miserable, all the while wondering why our lives feel so meaningless and unsatisfying. Socrates confronted this problem head on, like Dr. Seuss has dared to ask the questions, that most people ignore, to challenge conventional wisdom and to force people to think about what they were doing with their lives and why Dr. Seuss stories are fanciful. But they often pose for children and their parents' problems and questions that many of us as adults have learned to ignore or forget to our detriment. When we read the Sneetches, we wonder, am I acting like them? Do I judge and exclude others because of the superficial and meaningless things like the belly stars? The same with Socrates as he depicted in Plato's dialogue. His questions force people to think about and defend their beliefs and assumptions. And if, as often happiness, they can't answer his questions or respond adequately to his criticism, he exposes their ignorance and complacency and takes them to task for not paying more attention to how they're living their lives. In Plato's apology, while defending himself in a trial for his life, Socrates tells the jury provocatively, it says, I say it's the greatest good for a human being to discuss virtue every day and those other things about which you hear me conversing and testing myself and others, for the unexamined life is not worth living for a human being. According to Socrates, to fail and examine and discuss your deepest beliefs and values is to fail as a human being. Because of his conviction about the importance of a living and thoughtful, examined life, Socrates made it his mission to put people's lives to the test. As one's character in Plato's dialogue explains, whoever comes in close contact with Socrates and associates with him in conversation must necessarily keep on being led about by the man's arguments until he submits to answering questions about himself concerning both his present manner of life, the life has lived hitherto. And when he does submit to this question, you don't realize that Socrates won't let him go before he has well and truly tested every last detail. A Socratic cross-examination is often a painful experience. It is not easy having your beliefs and values called into question, your whole manner of life laying bare and scrutinized. But once you have submitted to Socrates' test, whether talking to the man himself or today by reading Plato's dialogues, it's hard to not be changed by the experience. You will come to a place where the streets are not marked. Some windows are lighted, but mostly they're dark. A place you could sprain both your elbow and your chin. Do you dare to stay out? Do you dare to go in? How much can you lose? How much can you win? One major theme of the places you'll go is the importance of having courage when facing life challenges. In his adventures, the young protagonist of the story faced many dangerous and uncertain situations: unmarked streets, dark windows, confusing wiggled roads, foul weather, prowling monsters. If he failed to face these problems courageously, to dare go in, he would have missed out on most of his opportunities and adventures. He's able to succeed and move mountains in large parts because he dares to go on, to take chances and face his fears. So what is courage and how do you get it? Socrates' main discussion of courage occurs in Plato's Laches, where Socrates talked to Athenian generals, Laches and Nietzsche's. Although the dialogue itself is probably fictional, the characters in it were real people. Both generals were well-known Athenian military and political leaders during the long, bloody Peloponnesian War against Sparta in the later half of the 5th century BCE. As generals, their primary duties include training and rallying soldiers to face death in battle. So if anyone should be able to define or explain course, it would be them. Socrates Socrates began by asking Legius to explain courage to him. Laches answers confidently, "Good heavens, Socrates, there is no difficulty about that. If a man is willing to remain at his post and defend himself against the enemy without running away, then you may rest assured that he is a man of courage." What Laches has in mind is the kind of courage typically required of Greek hoplites, armored foot soldiers facing an enemy charge. At that time, hoplites typically fought in a tight formation called phalanx. By fighting close together, they could interlock their shields to form a solid wall for protection, with the spears of men behind projecting over the top. Such a formation made a frontal assault by the enemy difficult, but only if each man held his ground and protected his fellow soldiers. The tight formation could fall apart disastrously if any soldier lost his nerve and ran away. A soldier who did not remain at his post and protect his comrades therefore put everyone in his unit in a greater danger. This kind of remaining at your post courage is exemplified nicely by the noble elephant Horton. And Horton hatches the egg in the story. Maïs, the lazy bird, is bored. She doesn't want to sit on her nest hatching her egg anymore, so she convinces the kind-hearted Horton to give her a break. And he agrees to sit on the egg for her. However, she immediately flies off on vacation to Palm Beach, leaving poor Horton alone in the nest, sitting on her egg for months apparently. But Horton refuses to give up, enduring thunder, rain, ice, and even mockery from other animals as he remains at his post and keeps his word. Eventually, Horton is even threatened by hunters who aims rifles straight at his heart. But did he run? He did not. Horton stayed on that nest. He held his head high and threw out his chest. He looked at the hunters as much as to say, "Shoot if you must, but I won't run away. I meant what I said. I said what I meant." The elephant is faithful 100%. The hunters are amused and decide to take Horton back home as a circus exhibit rather than shooting him. Horton's courage and faithfulness makes the story happy ending possible. If he had run away, he would not only have abandoned the eggs in his duty, but also put himself in greater danger. Remaining at your post, therefore, is sometimes very courageous indeed, but as Socrates points out, Laches' definition covers only one type of courageous actions. What about when military units perform other tactical maneuvers, such as feign retreat to draw the enemy in for a counterattack? What about the tactics of cavalry units, which swoop in for quick strikes and withdraw before they can be hemmed in? What about the courage shown by an army that has to retreat to fight another day? This is when a soldier needs courage to protect his friends when the army is demoralized and the enemy is bearing down on them. Socrates also wonders quite rightly about all the ways courage can be shown in situations other than battle. What about the bravery people show in the face of dangers at sea or illness or poverty? Horton, after all, shows courage not only when he stares down the hunter's guns, but also when he confronts bad weather, the skepticism and mockery of other animals, and the indignity of being caged up and shipped around the country in the circus. Also, Socrates asks, what about the people who courageously stand up against injustice and evil? In short, the problem with Laches' first definition is that it is too narrow. It applies well to the set of circumstances, but fails to account for many other instances of courage. Laches sees the face of Socrates' argument, and so he next tries a new, broader definition. Courage, he now says, is a sort of endurance of the soul. A courageous person is one who has the strength of mind to endure fear and threats. Socrates asks, to endure fear and threats. Socrates also underscores. Son begins injustice and evil. The problem lies just fist. Let's see, Socrates. Okay. Once again, Socrates found problems with Laches' answer. This time his definition is too broad because because there are too many cases where the endurance of the soul is not genuine. It's not genuine courage. For example, suppose that on a deer, a person endures danger and lies down on the yellow line in the middle of the busy street. Or suppose a racist endures criticism and holds stubbornly to his hateful beliefs. Both of these people display endurance of the soul, but neither show genuine courage. If courage is a virtuous and good quality to have, Socrates argues, an action should count as courageous only if it is noble and good. Endurance motivated by foolishness and stupidity isn't courage, but recklessness or stubbornness. Kevin Derwin as Bartholomew and the Oblique offers a good illustration of the danger posed by the foolish, stubborn endurance of the soul. King Derwin rules the kingdom of dead, but despite his power and the happiness of his kingdom, he's bored with the four things that naturally come from the sky: rain, sun, shine, frog, and snow. He wants something different and exciting, so he summons his royal magicians and orders them to cast a spell to make something new fall from the sky. Oblique, the king's page, Bartholomew Cubans persistently warns him, Your Majesty, I think that you would be very sorry. They'll do something crazy. Oblique, but the king won't listen, stubbornly persisting in his desire to be the mightiest man who ever lived and have something fall from the skies that no other kingdom has ever had before. Oblique, the results are predictably disastrous. The kingdom is inundated by the sticky green oblique, which covers everything and makes life impossible. But even at the lowest point of disaster, King Derwin continues to resist Bartholomew's suggestions. He finally shows genuine courage only when, at the end of the story, he admits his mistakes and says he is sorry. These examples show that a courageous person needs not only to be able to endure fear, danger, opposition, but also to endure them wisely at the right time for the right reasons. True courage is about facing fear and danger and enduring risk for the sake of an important and worthy goal. A soldier who stands his ground in order to protect his comrades is courageous. Horton shows courage when he refuses to bend the egg. Similarly to Horton, here's a Hugh. The elephant again displays courage when he stands up for and protects the Hughes. A civilization of tiny people living on a dust speck whom none of the other animals can hear. So what kind of wisdom does a courageous person need? The second general Nicias proposes that courage is knowledge of the fearful and hopeful in war and every other situation. In other words, a courageous person has the knowledge to be able to determine correctly which risks are worth facing and which are not. A courageous soldier has enough knowledge and wisdom to be able to determine when it's appropriate to have hope and stand his ground against the enemy, when it's better to retreat. A courageous citizen knows when to actively resist a tyrannical regimen and when to bide his time for a better opportunity. This is the courage displayed by Bartholomew Cubans. He may be a simple page boy, but he alone is wise enough to foresee the terrible consequences of the king's arrogance. And sure enough, when the Oblique disaster happens, he is the only one who keeps his head and recognizes what needs to be done. He defies the king, telling him what he needs to hear. Bartholomew Cubans can hold his tongue no longer and is going to keep on failing, he shouted, until your whole great marble palace tumbles down. So don't waste your time saying foolish magic words. You ought to be saying some plain simple words. Simple words, what do you mean, boy? I mean, said Bartholomew, that is all your fault now. The least you can do is say simple words, I'm sorry. If you won't even say you're sorry, you're no sort of king at all. Amazingly, this lowly page has the courage to berate a king who claims repeatedly to be the mightiest king in all the world, and he manages to shame the king into apologizing. In the end, even Nicias' definition fails to explain courage adequately. The problem is that all virtue seems to rest, at least in part, on knowledge of what is good and bad. Therefore, Nicias' definition fails to explain what is distinctive about courage and opposed to other good qualities that a person might have. By the end of the dialogue, Socrates and the two distinguished generals have failed to find a complete and adequate definition of courage. Now, one might wonder about the point of this exercise. Socrates wants the definition of courage, but if Laches and Nietzsche can do their jobs, why should it matter whether they can define it? But consider Laches and Nietzsche are supposed to be two of the best generals Athens has to offer, and it's their job to teach the young men of the city how to be courageous. Moreover, in battle, they're the ones who make the decisions and when to press forward, when to fall back, and when to cut losses and run. A general who is fundamentally confused about courage, a central material virtue, won't be able to make these decisions well. How can he lead armies and teach his soldiers to be courageous when he doesn't even know is himself, and more importantly, how much do any of the rest of us know? When these men who have spent their lives facing death and risk know so little, it's worth mentioning that although the historical Laches and Nietzsches both had some success during the war, they are the best. They are known for their failures for battles in which they led the Athenians to defeat. Given this history, we have to wonder that their simplistic and unexamined ideas about courage contribute to their failures. Even as he challenges the general's unexamined beliefs, however, Socrates nevertheless helps us to read as a dialogue to develop a deeper understanding. After reading the dialogue and thinking about the examples, we realize that courage does often involve standing firm and, like Horton, having endurance of soul and not abandoning your post in the face of obstacles and fear, but it also requires a sort of wisdom or knowledge to understand when it is worth holding firm and when it is better to change course. What you can see is clearly in the contrast between the stubbornness of King Darwin, and the wisdom and foresight of Bartholomew Cubans. Even if we can't define courage precisely, we nevertheless come to have a cleaner idea by examining our beliefs and thinking about these kind of examples. Should you turn left or right in 3/4 or maybe not quite, or go around and sneak in from behind? Simple as not, I'm afraid you will find. For a mind maker upper to make up his mind, it's pretty rare for most of us to undergo the kind of intense cross-examination of our beliefs and values which Socrates admits the characters in Plato's dialogue, which we're too lazy, complacent, or polite to test every detail of our lives, and let alone someone else's. So why does Socrates think it is so important? How does subjecting yourself to philosophical examination help you live a better life? According to Socrates, our biggest problem is that most of the time we just don't realize how ignorant we actually are about the things that matter. Dr. Seuss puts it nicely in passages above. We have to make up our minds about how to live and what paths to take, but it is harder than we realize. In Plato's Apology, Socrates explained how he has devoted his life to talking to anyone he meets, young or old, rich or poor, and asking them questions about virtue and happiness, about what is good and what is worth pursuing in life. And he discovered that although people that always feel confident, for the most part, they understand very little. They think they already know everything they need to know. In many cases, we saw the Laches. They can't imagine that there could be any doubt when Socrates puts their ideas to the test and challenges them to explain or support their claims or to show their beliefs with other things they believe. They can't do it. Like the Sneetches may ease the lazy bird and King Darwin, it turns out that they don't know as much as they think they do, and they often have to learn the lesson about their intellectual arrogance the hard way. This wouldn't be a serious issue if the things about which people are ignorant were trivial, or if we could muddle along well enough with our half-truths and conventional cliches. But according to Socrates, our situation is much worse than that. The matters upon which people are most ignorant are, at the same time, the most important and fundamental questions about life. Moreover, the beliefs people have about these matters are often not just ill-considered, incomplete, and inconsistent, but disastrously false, so that they end up wasting or ruining their lives. As Socrates says, they came to attach little importance to the most important things and the greater importance to inferior things. In other words, our priorities wind up being the opposite of what they should be. For example, many people with whom Socrates talks believe that happiness comes from wealth, possessions, or social status. They think that the more you have, the bigger your estate, the fancier your chariots, the more power and influences your will, the better off you are. We see this attitude and its consequences in Dr. Seuss's story, Gerd McFuzz. Gerd is a girl bird with the smallest plain tail there ever was, one droopy drop feather. That's all she had. The one feather made Gerd so mad. McFuzz, she is sad because she defines her self-worth by the quality and quantity of her 12 feathers. And when she sees another bird with 2 fancy feathers, she wants more. She thinks that if she had the prettier feathers, she would somehow be better than the other birds. She therefore eats pillberries from the pillberry bush until she has so many tail feathers that she can't fly. You go to the turtle. The king The king of the turtle pond makes a similar mistake. Life on the island of Salamasan is warm and happy for the turtles, but Yertle wants more. He decides that he needs a higher throne. If I could see high, how much greater I'd be. Would a king, I'd be the ruler of all I could see. Yertle defines his worth as a king, not by the wisdom of his decisions or the well-being of his subjects, but by how high he sits or how much he can see. In pursuit of his goal, he calls in hundreds of turtles for him to sit. I want to make his throne higher and higher so that he can see and be king of more and more things. Why do people define themselves and their self-worth in this way? In part is because they believe in a very confused way that's the goal of life. That the goal of life is to outdo or get more than others. They decide how worthy or happy they are, not by looking at the real conditions of their lives, but by comparing themselves superficially to others. Money, social status, and power thus provide ways of keeping score and figuring out if you are getting more or doing better than others. According to this way of thinking, the political, social, and economic community exists primarily as an arena for the cutthroat competition for wealth and status. The winners use guilt, brashness, and luck to get more. The losers are too weak, stupid, or gutless to compete. Now imagine a person with this worldview would approach his life choices and relationship, but he believes that happiness results from outdoing others. He will focus on doing whatever he thought would get him more, regardless of the consequences. He'd ignore or devalue anything that didn't appear to help him get ahead. More importantly, he'd have no scruples about doing anything it takes to get an edge, whether it be eating pillberries, cheating, taking steroids, tyrannizing other turtles, pawning off worthless credit, default swaps, or something even more sinister. Dr. Seuss, the Lorax is the most powerful cautionary tale about the challenging consequences of of the blind and unscrupulous pursuit of profit. When the Onceler arrives in the beautiful land of the truffalo trees, populated by swinging swami swans, frolicking brown barbaludas, and splashing hummingfish, he sets up business cutting down the truffalula trees to make his sales needs. His sole desire is to bigger his profits. I mean no harm, I most certainly do not. But I had to go bigger, so bigger I got. Bigger my factory, I biggered the roads, I biggered the wagons, I biggered the loads. I went right on biggering, selling more sneeds. I bigger my money, which everyone needs. The Lorax repeatedly warns him about what he's doing, but he doesn't listen. Eventually, his greed destroys the entire Truffaloa forest and drives away all the wonderful creatures so that he is left alone in an empty factory in a toxic wasteland. The Onceler's unquestioned desire for money, which everyone needs, blinds him to the terrible consequences of his actions. In Plato's dialogues, Socrates consistently argues that any person with this approach to life has no chance of finding true happiness. As the characters in Seuss's stories eventually discover, it isn't wealth, possessions, or power that make life happy and good. According to Socrates, what really matters for happiness is the condition of your soul. That is your mind and character, the kind of person you are. If you lack wisdom and integrity, if you value your own profit and self-interest over what's just and right, if your guiding motivation is a hubristic desire to outcompete and overpower others, you won't live a good life. You may well succeed in getting money or power or whatever it is you thought you wanted, but it won't make your life genuinely satisfying or worth living. And because you are so fundamentally ignorant, you often won't even realize what's wrong. You'll feel in conflict with yourself, deeply unsatisfied with your material gains, but you won't see that the problem lies in your own ignorance about the lack of concern for what really matters in life. Most people are not as blatantly dishonest, selfish, and opportunistic as Yertle, the Onceler. All the same, we do have unexamined, contradictory, and false beliefs that tend to undermine our happiness in less obvious, but no less real ways. For example, since the 50s, the United States has seen a trend toward working harder, longer hours in order to afford bigger houses farther from our workplaces, requiring us to spend more and more time in traffic like the Onceler. We biggered our houses, biggered our cars, biggered our houses at work, biggered our productivity and GDP. We have more material wealth than any country in the history of the world, but as a result, Americans increasingly have less and less time left over to spend with family and friends or to devote to non-work activities such as hobby or community service. Has it made us happier? Oh my goodness. Looking at the evidence, the answer seems to be emphatically not. Despite increasing material wealth, Americans are not happy. Research consistently shows that the factors that most contribute to an individual's happiness include spending time with families and close friends, hobbies, and contributing to the community. And that the thing that most people hate is spending time in traffic. Yet people keep making choices that result in them spending more time at work in traffic less time with family or friends, but still they wait, thinking that someday, somehow, things will get better. They're waiting for a better job, a promotion, a new office, a new car, maybe just a bigger television or fancier smartphone. Something to relieve stress, disharmony, and boredom they have created in their own lives through their choices. These people are stuck in, as Dr. Seuss says, a most useless place, the waiting place, for people just waiting. For people just waiting for a train to go, or a bus to come, or a plane to go, or the mail to come, or the rain to go, or the phone to ring, or the snow to snow, or waiting for around for a yes or no, or waiting for their hair to grow. Everyone is just waiting for the fish to bite, waiting for the wind to fly a kite, or waiting for a Friday night, or waiting perhaps for their Uncle Jake, or a pot to boil, or a better break, or a string of pearls, or a pen, or a pair of pants, or a wig without curls, or another chance. Everyone is just waiting. Socrates and Seuss would agree that when someone gets stuck waiting like this, something has gone fundamentally wrong with his way of thinking about the most important matters in life. Someday, he says to himself, I'll be happy. The problem is that someday never comes, and he doesn't have the courage or imagination to try something different. He needs to re-examine what he really values and what really makes him happy rather than just accepting the same old ideas about what he ought to value. Perhaps we need to leave the old, well-worn paths behind. Like Sue's protagonist, head straight out of town. The places you'll go. The journey of life. You look up and down streets, look over them with care. About some you would say, I do not choose to go there. With your head full of brain and your shoes full of feet, you're too smart to go down a not so good street. And you may not find, and you may not find you'll want to go down. In that case, of course, you'll head straight out of town. If, as Dr. Seuss suggested, life is a journey, a fantastical adventure or a game, how do we decide where to go, what paths to take once we strike out away from the well-known paths of the conventional wisdom? Once we challenge that everyone believes and start asking questions, we'll find that there are no easy answers. How do we deal with what life gives us so that we can live the good and happy lives that we want? According to Dr. Seuss, the answer is clear. You have brains in your head, feet in your shoes, so that you use them and do the best you can with what life gives you. In other words, humans are rational beings, and we need to use our rational capacities to make the best decisions to make. We need to use our rational capacities to make the best decisions we can. Plato's credo, as Socrates is facing a difficult decision about whether or not to escape from prison and avoid his execution, his tells his friend Credo, we must therefore examine whether we should act this way or not, as not only now, but all the times I am kind of a man who listens to nothing within me but the argument that on reflection seems best to me. Socrates faces an ethical dilemma. If he escapes from prison, he'll be breaking the law and betraying all that he stood for in his life. But if he stays, he'll be executed and leave his children without a father to care for and protect them. Either choice is ethically problematic, but because he spent his life examining himself and others and thinking about happiness, virtue, or other ethical issues, he is about to make a better decision, choose a better path. In the Phaedo, Socrates' friend Samias provides a very persuasive metaphor for the situation we face as a negative. The journey of our lives, one should achieve one of those things, learn the truth for these things, or find it for oneself, or if that is possible, adopt the best and most influential of men's theories and born upon this sail through the dangers of life as a pawn and wrap. As we sail through life, we're going to face new situations and challenges that our previous life and experience haven't prepared us for. We're going to have setbacks and failures, slumps and loneliness, hazards and dangers that will need courage and wisdom to traverse. And when you're in a slump, you're not in for much fun. Unslumping yourself is not easily done, especially in a rapidly changing world. We'll continually face new challenges and new games that we need to learn to play in order to succeed. Sometimes things will go our way, but often they won't. The person who is able to live best and most successfully is someone who has developed the ability to think rationally and thoughtfully about what really matters, who can learn from her mistakes and continually improve the raft upon which he sails the seas of life, and who can make the wise decisions. As Sue says, life's a great balancing act. Places the key to find the right balance. Perhaps more importantly for Socrates, living rationally constitutes a distinctively human way of life. Even before Socrates, Greek philosophers agreed that what makes humans special and different from other animals is the ability to reason. To say that humans are rational beings means, among other things, that we can weigh options and choose the path for ourselves that we judge best. A human being is not a mere thing carried passively along the currents of life. In order to flourish and excel in human life, we must use the brains in our head to decide what our lives will be. Kid, you'll move mountains. Step with the care and great tact, and remember the life's great balancing act. Just never forget to be dexterous and deft, and you never mix up your right foot with your left. And will you succeed? Yes, you will indeed. 98 and 3/4% guaranteed. The ending of all the places you'll go is thoroughly positive. Dr. Seuss assures us that if we take his advice and set off boldly along the journey of life, we'll do great things. But how can Seuss be so confident of success? Aren't some setbacks and slumps just too much to overcome? And don't even the best choices sometimes fail to work out? Once again, I think Dr. Seuss' answers to those questions is similar to the ones Socrates and other ancient philosophers would give. Other ancient philosophers will give Socrates and most ancient philosophers argued that in the final reckoning, the external events of life are what matter most. If you don't actually fly ahead of other people or win games to manage to move a mountain, it's not important. What matters is the attitude that you have about life, the choices you make in the face of what life gives you. Success and the ancient philosophers agree that someone who has courage to question and find her own path and the wisdom to face problems and the challenges with equanimity, who develops rational abilities to make good decisions about her life, will almost certainly succeed in life. So as Dr. Seuss says, be the name of your Bucks Bomb or Bigsby or Bray or Modesty, Ali Van Allen O'Shea, you're off to great places today. Today is your day. Your mountain is waiting, so get on your way.